Yeah, just pointed out just before. You know how it is. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم ما بعد. I have limited time and I've limited it even further by just going through this, trying to find it. Inshallah, today's session is going to be talking about building identity. There's lots of talks we hear about the issue of identity, the identity crisis, but we actually need some solutions now. I think we've had plenty of the crisis talks. Today's session at Jamea is going to be about building identity. Tomorrow at Shuhada I'm doing on how to lose identity. And I thought I'd do it in terms of case studies from the Quran. So the story of identity, which is in my understanding the case study of building identity, is a story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. I'm not going to give you the kind of introduction and the preface and all of that. Let's get straight into it. Ibrahim alayhi salam is born into a community that worships idols. Understand what this means. To oppose those idols is unacceptable, and it's a crime that's punishable by instant cancellation. We hear of the term of cancellation in today's culture. If you were to speak against the idols in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, you get cancelled pretty instantly. In this community or in this time, if you probably talk about Palestine, if you talk about certain groups or certain other things, you'd probably get cancelled. It's similar to that. Why? Because the idols were the highest authority. There's no authority higher than that of the idols. When we look at the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, me and you start thinking immediately, yeah, but I'm not worshipping idols. I'm living in the 21st century. I'm smarter than that. I'm not going to really be worshipping idols anytime soon. How is this story relevant to me? And as an extension, how is the Quran relevant to me, etc., etc.? I agree we don't worship stone idols or wooden idols, but we definitely do have ideas and ideologies, not idols, but ideologies or ideals that we believe in, that actually if we were to call them out or we were to speak against certain ideals, we would also face instant cancellation. These ideas and these ideologies are very similar to the idols that Ibrahim alayhi salam and his time and his community, the people of his community, they worshipped. And this is where the Quranic relevance comes in. There are certain idols and ideals of today that I cannot even propose an alternative worldview. In tonight's session, inshallah, after Taraweeh, where I have a bit more time, that's where we're going to kind of look at the more juicier questions of things like grooming gangs and jihad and all of the other uncomfortable things that you don't really generally want to talk about, but we need to talk about. So inshallah, that's for tonight, where we kind of challenge the worldview that exists and kind of present a different narrative to that. But for now, let's understand this case study. Ibrahim alayhi salam's legacy itself begins with questioning the status quo of his community, of him coming out and ruffling feathers and saying, I'm not too comfortable about this idol worship stuff. By the way, bear in mind, his own father is the one who produces idols, who's there carving idols. So you're not just ruffling feathers in your community, you're actually ruffling feathers within your own home, where you're saying something which is uncomfortable even for your father to hear. And so he questions that which is directly in front of him. Why? He doesn't care about cancellation. He's not worried about losing his job. He's not worried about losing this or losing that or having to save face within the community. What will the neighbors say, and what will your cousins say, and what will your auntie say, who doesn't really care too much about you. And so it's that concern about cancellation within your community as well. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam does this brilliant thing where he starts asking questions and he starts questioning that which is around him. Now, I want to go through the Quranic text and see exactly how Allah talks about it, because it's a Quranic study. But what I will mention here is, there's a very, very important point over here that before we move on from Ibrahim alayhi salam, which is one of the questions that I got through to answer tonight, which I think is connected to Ibrahim alayhi salam's story. The question of, should we be thinking about making hijrah? Should we be thinking about moving to another country? Maybe Turkey is a good viable option. Maybe other countries people are looking at and thinking about migrating and moving. I'll remind you of a very simple idea. Ibrahim alayhi salam's story teaches us that you can be born within the worst of circumstances in a community filled with polytheism, but you can still preserve your faith if you do something about it. It's all down to what you do. You can be born in a home of disbelief, but you can decide whether you work to preserve that faith. At the same time, you can be born in the home of a prophet, like Yusuf alayhi salam's children, they were, and that doesn't save you. You can be born in the home of Nuh alayhi salam, and that doesn't save you. Nuh alayhi salam's children, Allah mentions very explicitly in the Quran, وَنَادَى نُوحٌ ابْنَهُ, after his son decides, you know what, Dad, I'm not going to get on board this ark of yours, I'm going to do my own thing. I know better. I'm going to stand on the top of this mountain and I'll be okay. Nuh calls out to his son. You can imagine how he's calling out to his son, alayhi salam. And he says, وَكَانَ فِي مَعْزِلٍ, Allah says, he was on this mountain top. And he's there thinking he's secure. يَا بُنَيَّ ارْكَمْ مَعَنَا وَلَا تَكُمْ مَعَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Join us on board this ark. Don't do this. You're going to regret this. You can be born in the home of a prophet. You can be born in the home of an imam. You can be born in the home of a scholar. You can be born in this safe community of Preston. That doesn't preserve your faith. Moving to another country doesn't preserve your faith. It might increase those chances, possibly, but faith is where you build it. It's as simple as that. And Ibrahim alayhi salam's story, the prophetic stories indicate towards that idea as well. Adam alayhi salam's story, his two children, one kills the other. And again, I've mentioned this previously to you all, and I say it again. There's a reason Allah brings really uncomfortable stories about the children of prophets to tell us that this can happen to anybody. Moving on to the actual kind of story of Ibrahim alayhi salam here. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ آزَرَ, Allah tells us directly that look back to the time when Ibrahim said to his father Azar, أَتَتَّخِذُ أَصْنَامًا آلِهَةً, do you really take idols to be your gods? And for me and you, let's change the word idols to ideals to be your gods. Whether the ideals are feminism, modernity, modernity, atheism, any of these ideas. إِنِّي أَرَاكَ وَقَوْمَكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, that I really think you and your people, they've made a mistake here, a really big mistake. وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Where does that faith come from? Where does he come from? Like, where does he get that deep-rooted faith from? Allah mentions, we showed to Ibrahim, malakut as-samawati wal-ard, that we showed him the kind of the grandeur and the wonderful things of the skies and the earth. وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. It's a very simple thing that Allah is teaching us, that Allah actually says to us, we showed him the dominion of this entire universe. What does this mean? When you're raising children, one of the things that you really want to do, and I want to do, and we all want to do, is ensure that they know that Allah is the one who runs everything. As much as we want to say this person runs this, and he does this, and he does that, and be careful, deep down, the strongest thing you can give to your children is, the malakut as-samawati wal-ard belongs to Allah. Allah tells us this because He juxtaposes. Look. The previous verse is Allah telling us, Ibrahim had the audacity to say this. And how did he have the audacity? وَكَذَلِكَ. And that is how. We showed Ibrahim alayhi salam the dominion of the heavens and the earth. When you're walking around with that in your mind, that Allah really does everything. Nobody does but Allah. Like, that changes your worldview, that changes how you approach. If I want to speak on a matter and someone's going to cancel me, Allah's the one who does. Why do I care about all of that? If I'm going to go, assist in some sort of welfare and something happens to me, Allah's the one who controls everything. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. وَكَذَلِكَ نُورِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. It's a very powerful idea. And remember, me and you, we live in a time of cause and effect. And because we live in a time and a world of cause and effect, everything we do, it comes down to cause and effect. If I do this, this will happen. And if I don't do this, this will happen. And that's generally how we live life. The stories of prophets comes to say to you, no, not really. We're going to give you something called miracles, which is going to break those trends. Ibrahim alayhi salam is going to be thrown into a fire. Cause and effect, he should burn, he should die, he shouldn't be really comfortable in that fire. He is comfortable in that fire. Allah is telling us and reminding us, it can happen today as well. Faith is something that has to be developed. If you read books like Hayatus Sahaba and you read the lives of the Sahaba, you'll find some amazing stories, mind-boggling stories of their faith and the things that Allah brings into fruition just because of faith. It comes down, when we're talking about building identity, this is Ibrahim alayhi salam who doesn't have an identity, who needs to build it. And watch how Allah builds it. And so, وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ, so that you can have yaqeen. That muqinin sounds like yaqeen. It's because it's the same letters. It's talking about, Allah is talking about building yaqeen. Right? And it's through appreciating this one concept, Allah does everything. And so that idea is a very, very important and powerful idea. Allah continues, Ya ayyuhal khair. وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Yes. And so, continuing with the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah then continues and Ibrahim alayhi salam develops a philosophical and a rational argument for the existence of Allah. And Allah presents it in the Quran. He says, فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ. This is before he's given prophethood. Listen to the wording and the way he thinks. فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ. When the night kind of fell, رَأَى كَوْكَبًا. Ibrahim sees كَوْكَبًا, he sees stars. قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي. This is my Lord. Pause. If you're not really a Muslim, why are you using words like Rabbi? It's interesting. Why is Ibrahim alayhi salam already using words and terminologies like this? Maybe Allah is trying to show us something. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ. And when these stars disappeared, قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. I'm not really a big fan of those things that disappear. I don't love to believe in those things that disappear. Okay, so there's a few things we're going to come back to there. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا. He then sees the moon in all its glory. قَالَ. He says, هَذَا رَبِّي. No, this is my Lord. So he's using that technical term again, Rabb. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ. When it disappears, قَالَ. He says, لَإِن لَمْ يَهْدِنِي رَبِّي. If my Lord does not guide me. He's using language which you wouldn't expect somebody to use until they've accepted Islam. How does he know the idea of guidance? How does he know Rabbi? لَأَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الضَّالِّينَ. I will be from that people who are misguided. He's talking about misguidance as though he knows about guidance and misguidance when he doesn't at this stage. I'm trying to show you that there's something that's rooting him. And until you don't ask these questions, when you read the stories in chronology, and you're thinking, this is strange speech. How is he saying this? فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغَةً. He sees the sun in all its glory. قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا أَكْبَرُ. This really is my Lord, this is the big one. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَتْ. But then it sets. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ. O my people, إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ. Genius statement, he says, I am free from that which you ascribe. So let's see actually what's going on over here. It seems like he's seeking a higher power. He's using words like Rabb and all of this. Where's that coming from? So he's presenting a scientific, or you could say a rational argument. So let's also use a rational argument and try and work out, why do we believe? Because people are quite uncomfortable about this idea of belief. Right? When you go to universities and things like this, generally it's quite strange. You believe? Really, it's not so normal to believe. Let me present to you research that was conducted by the University of Oxford. It was a £1.9 million project, involved 57 well-recognized and qualified researchers who conducted over 40 separate studies over 20 different countries. You can find it yourself on Google. Just type in the Oxford study on belief in God. and you'll find all the data and all of the kind of whatever else you're interested in. The studies concluded, and I'm quoting, both analytically and empirically, that humans are predisposed to believe in a God and to believe in an afterlife. What this means is, once you get rid of the nurture element, me and you raising our kids, that's nurturing them to believe in Islam. When you kind of factor that out, from a nature perspective, we are predisposed to believe in a God. And we are predisposed to believe in an afterlife. That's what the research shows. And that's £2 million worth of research. And so they conducted this research to determine whether concepts such as God and the Akhirah are entirely taught concepts, which a child will only believe after they taught them about God, or whether these are basic expressions of human nature. It seems Allah is teaching us something just from the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It's hardwired into every single one of us, that we should want to find Allah. We should want to yearn for Allah. We should be looking for a higher being and a higher power. That's not something which is strange. The strange thing is to live life not looking for Allah. The strange thing is to kind of cloud that and say, no, surely I shouldn't really be looking for Allah. That's the weird thing. According to the research, if we're really going off empirical data, and actually the Quran mentions this in a lot of detail already. You didn't need the Oxford research and the study that was conducted by Oxford. The Quran already told us about this. When we were not human beings in bodies and forms, we were just the soul. This soul was in Alamul Arwah, where the souls were collected. And Allah mentions at that stage that Allah said to us, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? Qalu bala, we all said yes. Shahidna, we testify. None of us remembers this. Actually, this is where the scholars talk about, this is your hardwiring within your system. This is the hardwiring that Allah has placed, known as what's called the fitrah. The fitrah is the natural disposition. We incline towards God already. That's something within us. But Allah's already talked about that, and we don't want to go too deep into those arguments. وَحَاجَّهُ قَوْمُهُ. So Ibrahim, and I should mention that last point. It's very, very important. Look at what he says. He looks to the stars. He doesn't find his solution. He looks to the moon. He doesn't find his solution. He looks to the sun. He doesn't find his solution. Despite that, what does he say? Inni bari'um mimma tushrikun. I am free from what you guys are doing. Listen to this carefully. You go to university and somebody presents to you a new worldview. Feminism. You come across this new worldview. It doesn't make full sense to you. But it's better than what you understand about Islam. Instead of saying, this doesn't make sense, even if I've not fully understood Islam, I'm not going to accept something that you presented to me. Ibrahim alayhi salam is saying, I don't think the stars are the solution, the moon is the solution, the sun is the solution. But just because they are not the solution doesn't mean I'm going to accept your solution. I'm still going to keep looking. That means that just because you don't have the answer yet in front of you, that doesn't mean you take the second best argument. No, you continue looking. You continue searching. Inni bari'um mimma tushrikun. I'm not going to accept what you guys believe in, these idols, because that doesn't make sense either. But I'm not going to accept it just because nothing else makes sense. When you go to university and somebody dazzles you, and again tonight, we'll talk about some of those things that you are dazzled by, and we'll kind of dismantle them, and I'll try and present to you, inshallah, some of the difficult questions on faith that you really grapple with. They're not so difficult, they're very easy, but it's just that we haven't studied. And so, that's that verse. وَحَاجَّهُ قَوْمُهُ. Ibrahim alayhi salam then debates and argues with his community. قَالَ أَتُحَاجُّنِّي فِي اللَّهِ وَقَدْ هَدَانِي. Now, there's a lot of verses there. I'm conscious that I'm limited for time, but I want to show you kind of one last verse that is connected to all of this, which I think is one of my favorite verses in the initial story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in terms of developing an idea, an identity, all of these things. When Ibrahim alayhi salam actually questions his community, again, we're talking about developing and building an identity crisis, yeah? إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. What's these idols that you're worshipping? Ibrahim asks. Well, their response, وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. We found our forefathers worshipping these. Listen carefully to this. We don't do anything because our forefathers did it, let's be honest. The forefathers, who are their ancestors were their role models. This is not something to overlook. Allah has presented this in a genius fashion. Their ancestors were the types of people that once they passed away, you kind of made an idol of them, you put a photo of them on your place of worship, and that still happens in some cultures today, and you worship your idol, keeping in mind that our forefathers taught us this. They looked at these idols as their everything. You might wonder, but how is that relevant to me and you? Who are our forefathers of today? Who are the people that are looked up to today? Who are the people pushing and promoting the ideologies of today? There's a couple of people. There's social media personalities. That's the aba of our community. You see, the Quran is genius in the way it presents it. And so, whatever they do, whatever trend they set, that's the fashion of the day. And so, the example I always give is, for example, something like a bottle of Prime that's so exciting for a child to hold in their hand. That bottle of Prime isn't really much different to other drinks. It's because of the social media personalities that are behind it. If you say to them, why are you holding this bottle of Prime with so much pride? وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. Our forefathers, the people we look up to, these are the people who have given us our identity. And you think you're laughing at kids with their bottle of Prime. Ask the woman who's got her specific, she needs her very specific bag or very specific shoes of the latest season of Gucci or Dolce & Gabbana, and even men today, the same thing. If you ask them, why are you doing this? وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. This is what's in vogue. This is what's in culture. What do you mean? I can't wear this. I can't wear Umbro. I can't wear this brand or Fila or that one. It has to be a Nike. It has to be Adidas. It has to be 3 stripes. It has to be the swoosh. That's the وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا لَهَا عَابِدِينَ. And so that's what the Quran does in its very genius fashion. It looks at how to develop that identity. And so all I wanted to do is present a few snippets, a few examples in the 20 minutes, the 15 minutes that I have, is that لَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Ibrahim alayhi salam with a lot of confidence says, your social media personalities and your ancestors that you're following, let's be honest, they're very misguided. They're not doing something which is correct. They're not really telling you what's best for you. And so developing identity, in my understanding, the Quranic case study, which I think needs a more detailed course, which we're working on at the moment, alhamdulillah, is Ibrahim alayhi salam's story. The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam is the entire story about developing identity, and there's much, much more within this story. Inshallah, if we get time, we can go through it. But it requires a person to go through this story and look at it from the verses of the Quran and see how Allah has presented it. We've not even got to him becoming a prophet. We've not even got to him getting kicked out of his community. We've not got to any of that. We've just got to Ibrahim alayhi salam as he is still a child questioning the things around him, how much you can learn about developing identity. Whether you're thinking of migrating, you've got your answers for that. Whether you're thinking of what I need to do for my children, you've got your answers for that. Whether you're thinking about why is my child just a follower and following trends, you've got your answers to that. All of the identity crisis questions are covered here. Inshallah, tonight we cover some of the more complex questions, not connected to this, but just generally. I'm not interested in too much looking at fiqh of stuff, like, are we allowed to do this or we're not allowed to do that? You can get that from anywhere, but more in terms of the questions that you might get asked at work, the questions you get asked about Islam. And so I would advise, keep it 14 plus, if maybe we could communicate that. I don't want a bunch of children sat here and then I start talking about grooming gangs and then parents have to answer difficult questions. What's a grooming gang? It's a bit difficult to answer those questions. So 14 plus, I think, because it's going to be that type of session, inshallah. May Allah give us all tawfiq. Engage in dua, inshallah. Very valuable time. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم لك صمت وبك آمنت وعليك توكلت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.